Welcome to the latest edition of All's Caps with former Capitals defenseman Karl Alzner. I'm AP hockey writer Steve Wino. Later, we will be joined by current Capitals forward Connor McMichael to talk a little bit about playing center in the NHL. He, of course, does Carl's Stupid Questions. But first, the trade deadline. Your old buddy, your old teammate, Marcus Johansson. What are your thoughts on the moves Brian McClellan made with bringing in Marcus and bringing in Johan Larsson?
Yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. I know a lot of teams made some pretty big splashes, went out and got some really big name players. And I don't necessarily think you always need to go out there and get those guys. You get people that fit what you need. And we had talked about who might be coming. And I mean, I didn't really have Jojo on my radar too much, but when it comes down to it, I think it's an amazing fit because he can play up and down this lineup pretty easily. He knows all the players that are on the top two lines. And he can pass the puck still so good. He can still skate really well. He's the other piece to complete Nick Backstrom, as we've joked around. They kind of go together, they're a good duo. So I really like having Jojo here. I think from what he said when I texted him that this is the only place he wanted to go to. So someone that comes to a situation that they are really excited about and you get more out of them, it's not like he just got traded to somewhere and now he's got to figure things out. He knows this place. So I think you're going to get something good out of Jojo. And then Larsson, we talked about it a little bit. He's going to slot in nicely and just kind of round out the forward crew because there's been just so as much depth as possible. And the fourth line, as I always say, the fourth line on this team has been so valuable for this team over the last couple of years.
Of course,
that you need to have, you need to have good options there, and I think that he's gonna really help them out.
Let's first of all, we need people to stop calling him Mojo because no one called him Mojo, right? Like this is a thing that fans did, and every once in a while I was like, what was his nickname? It was never Mojo, right?
It's so funny that you say that. So. At times, people called him Mojo, but it was usually Jojo. Like that's just
right.
Or Bajojo is what we would call him too. And so my wife Mandy the other day, she was calling him Mojo, and she said, "That is what you guys called him, right?" I'm like, well, not so much. We called him more Jojo than Mojo. But anyways, it's whatever. Like you can call people whatever the heck you want, as long as you understand. Some people say OV, some people say OV. It's just kind of whatever you wanna say. It's just. He may not respond to you if you say it to him.
Right, and I just want to keep it correct with Jojo as the nickname. But you're right, and this is what Brian McClellan said, and Peter Laviolette says about Marcus Johansson is you can move him up and down the lineup, and I think even Johan Larsson, if you need to in a pinch play him in a top nine role, you can do it. But you have there's a mix that I see on this team now. Is you could go Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Wilson, Mantha, Backstrom, Johansson, and then Sherry, Eller, Oshie, and Larsson or AJF with Dowd and Hathaway. That's a pretty solid forward core and a really good top six on defense as long as Trevor Van Riemsdyk is healthy.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And then we think about the power play too. Like Jojo played that half wall and the low guy on the power play for years. He knows exactly what to do. So, a lot of times when the top unit comes off the ice, you still have Ovi out there. You sometimes have Carly and Orly switch or whoever is going to switch Schultz. But now you put Jojo out there, who has been a top line power play guy for this team for lots of years in the past and can still do it. So you still have lethal players that are out there and someone who can get that pass from the goal line or the half wall all the way to Ovi if that's what you want to do. So I mean, it's not the big splash that, like I said, that some teams did, but it's kind of a sneaky splash, I think. And as long as he stays healthy, because he's had some injury troubles too over the years. I think it could be really good. And I'm really hoping that, the mental state for him is going to really bring him to that level.
Yeah, and we'll save your best Marcus Johansson stories. Hopefully have him on this podcast very soon. But Johan Larsson is a guy who's coming off sports hernia surgery. You had that core muscle surgery, right, Carl?
Yeah, I did.
How tough is it coming back from that?
I think everybody's a little bit different because, Joe Ward had it. I think Chimmer may have had it.
I think you're right.
Richards had it. Like lots of guys have had this, and I asked them all about it. Like, what's the recovery like? What do I do exactly? And some guys recover different than others. For me, it was really hard because I had the ab tear in conjunction with the groin tear, and it was I was trying to rehab one versus the other at the same time, and it just didn't go that great for me. I mean, I couldn't sprint or do any sort of running exercises for 3 years after that, and so
Wow.
that's not really the way you train when it comes to hockey. So I had to try and find something else. So it can be different for everybody. Trotzy was the one that brought it up to me, that he had a player that was never the same after they had it done, and so you need to find a way to adapt. And unfortunately, the game is very fast, and if you
Yeah.
don't have speed, you don't really have too much success in the league. So I'm not sure exactly how he's feeling, but you lean on the trainers as hard as possible to help you get there.
Yeah, and good news is he appears to be about a week or so away from being available. Took part in his first practice on Wednesday, and should be able to join this lineup very soon. Let's talk about what Brian McClellan and the Capitals did not do at the deadline. They didn't add a goaltender. They didn't add a left shot depth defenseman. How comfortable are you with the moves not made at the deadline?
Yeah, well, so the big one is the goaltending. That's the one we talked about the most, and I think what I'm really happy with, and I feel proud for him, is Vitek Vanacek. Like
For sure.
he I'm sure heard all the rumors, probably heard it being talked about all the time, and he grabbed that job, and he's been playing solid. Like definitely I think good enough. Obviously good enough that Mac didn't feel the need to go out there and pay maybe a little bit extra for some sort of rental or whatever he was going to do. I think he should feel very proud of the fact that maybe the staff and the management showing some confidence in him to be the guy, and yeah, I think his game is definitely turned around. I mean, you probably watch it a little bit closer than I do, but yeah, that didn't happen. And the defense, I think for them it's just about health. I think they're good
It
enough
is.
to be able to play and make a big run. So I'm not too worried about that. But yeah, it's hard. You got lots of teams vying for these players, and the price can be high, and they clearly need to continue to start building through the draft over the next couple of years. You don't really want to give away too many assets.
Yeah, and I actually think the defense move is the one I think Brian McClellan maybe should have, just in case of injury. But if those top six guys stay healthy, and you've got Faravari and Carlson, and you've got Orlov and Jensen, and you've got TVR and Schultz, that's a pretty solid six. And unlike the year you guys had seven, I don't think Peter Lalivielette's going to dress seven defensemen anytime soon.
Oh, yeah, I hope not. I don't like no defenseman like 7D, no forward like 7D either. I don't think so. Yeah, hopefully that's not the case. But yeah, they need to stay healthy. And speaking of that, let's just talk about the Carlson Jamie Ben thing.
Oh yeah,
That was
it was dirty, right?
made me feel sick to my stomach. I'm, I don't imagine Ben expected that to happen, but that's just one of those plays where you just can never ever do it. And if you look, even watch it in slow mo, like it wasn't that big of a cross check, but all it takes is a perfectly timed
Just a little bit, right?
And he ends up catching an edge and going into the boards. Like I felt sick watching that, and that's like my biggest nightmare as a hockey player is to go into the boards like that with that much speed. And it's happened to me a couple times on the half wall, and it's just gross. Like you feel sick when it happens to anybody on the ice. So we can't have anything like that happen, especially to the big boy. That would be not good for this team.
No, and it was dirty, and Peter Laviolette said it after the game, and it was one of those where I don't think it, and you know this, and I think having watched enough hockey that we have that, and we played enough that you have, that it doesn't take a whole lot of action there to just kind of like contort John's body a little bit to lose the edge, because even a little bit of contact when you're racing for the goal line, really more than the puck there, but like a little contact can make a big difference.
Yeah, and so it's one of the things that happen. Like you're putting so much pressure on your edges at different times of the stride, and if someone gets you in when you're putting all your weight on one edge, and they give you just a little tap, or you're about to put your weight on one, just like Carly was in that instance, you're done. Like you go down, and that's sometimes why you see these guys. It may look like a flop sometimes when they're flying in the air and the gloves go wild and everything, but it's just a perfectly timed jab to the back of the leg. Or I would always do this on face-offs especially when the hash marks were closer together. When I was on the half wall, so if you can envision this, in the D zone, I was up against the boards.
Yep.
I would always just line up with my stick right in front of the forward skate. And just as the puck was about to be dropped, I knew that they were going to be pushing off, and I would just tap the top of their skate and they would fall, and I would have just free reign to get the puck and wheel behind the net. And then I did it to Mike Ribeiro one time in Nashville, and he was looking in the stands because Ribs is kind of one of those guys that was just, as good of a player he wasn't always, laser focused on what was happening. And I remember doing that to him, and he went just face plant into the ice, and he came over. He's like, "Man, what are you doing? You're making me look stupid out here." And I'm like, "Well, you weren't paying attention, so I had to get you." And it's just one of those little things that you just get them at the right time. And then they move the hash marks further apart, and then I couldn't quite do it as much. And it's, I lost one of my little tricks. But anyways, as I was saying, you just got to be careful. Like that stuff happens. And you just hope, like, Carly went into the boards. Like, he probably couldn't have gone into the boards any better than he did. Like, it was still violent looking, but like, he went in, he didn't go full shoulder. He didn't go all knee. Like, I think he was very lucky.
He was. And one more thing before we bring in Connor McMichael, Daniel Sprong, not long for this place, was not a fan. Peter Laviolette was not a fan of Daniel Sprong. What do you think didn't work out with Daniel Sprong and the Washington Capitals?
It just didn't seem like, just couldn't quite find the groove, right? We saw like flashes of really, really good play, and talking to the guys and some of the coaches, like, they said that, like, this guy shoots the puck the same way Ovi does. Maybe not as accurate as Ovi. Ovi is one of the best all time, but in terms of speed and how it can come off the stick, like, that's an asset, right? It's hard to find guys like that, but unfortunately for him, there is another guy like that, and he happens to be the best goal scorer in the world right now. And if Sprong had that spot on the power play, he may have been scoring 20, 30 goals for this team. But unfortunately, you got one guy, and he plays a minute 45 on the PP all the time. He plays on the top line, and there's doesn't seem to be a space for you. So if you can't do that role, you need to find something else, and it just didn't seem to materialize. So you have to move on, and it's unfortunate for him, because it could have been fun. It would have been really fun to see him succeed, but that's the business, man. You lose friends all the time. You lose people you like, and it's just the way that it works.
Yeah, and the way I described it is he didn't score enough to make up for the other areas of the ice he wasn't good enough at. And like, you could afford some of the defensive liability and the turnovers and some of the lazy plays if he's putting the puck in the net a bunch, and he just wasn't scoring enough to outscore those problems.
Well, that's exactly right. You look at a guy like Ovi, and I think his game has come.
For sure.
It's so much more well-rounded now than maybe when he was younger, but he made up for it by scoring 50 goals every year. So it's like, yeah, okay, do that, and we'll figure the rest out. A guy like me, for example, I couldn't score, so I had to play really hard D, and I had to block lots of shots, because I knew that's where my ticket was. And those are the guys that find ways to stick around, as you find out what your role is. And like, these guys, like, they come from junior, and they're the guy most of the time, right? They're the ones that are scoring 50, but not everybody can do that in the pros, and you just got to find your spot. And so, maybe on a different team, he is the goal scorer, but on this team, like you said, needed to find something else that would make him successful and make him sticky.
Right. And speaking of junior stars who have to find their way in the league, next up on All's Caps, we are going to be joined by Connor McMichael. This is AP hockey writer Steve Wino with former Capitals defenseman Carl Alsner, the host of the All's Caps podcast on Ampire Media.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to everybody that's tuning in to the All's Caps podcast on the Ampire Media YouTube channel. We're going to try and get as much going as we can.
Well, we love doing the video stuff. I hope you also get a chance to listen to the John Keim report about the Washington Commanders. We're going to have John on at some point and do some cross promotion, but please stay tuned to everything that we have on Ampire Media, on YouTube, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Thanks, guys.